The thunder of hooves echoed through the night as Eliza Farrow raced away from everything she knew, her heart pounding as fiercely as her mare's galloping feet. Tears streamed down her face, evaporating in the cool Montana air of 1876 as she pushed forward, determined to leave behind the pain and heartbreak of Wildwater Creek. She had nearly reached the ridge that would take her away forever when she heard the sound of pursuit, a lone rider gaining ground behind her. "Eliza," the voice cut through the darkness. "Don't leave without me." Eliza pulled hard on the reins, her horse whinnying in protest as she turned to see Yorke Newland's silhouette against the moonlit sky. His cowboy hat was askew, his usually neat appearance disheveled from the urgent chase. She hadn't expected him to follow. She hadn't expected anyone to care enough to stop her. "Go back, Yorke," she called, her voice breaking. "There's nothing left for me here and certainly nothing for us." Yorke brought his stallion to a halt just feet from her, his breathing heavy. "That's where you're wrong, Eliza. I'm not letting you ride off into the night without hearing me out." His eyes, even in the darkness, held an intensity that made her pause. "Not after everything." Eliza tightened her grip on the reins, conflicted. She had planned her escape meticulously, supplies packed, money saved from months of work at the general store, a rough map to Helena where she could start anew. She hadn't counted on her heart faltering at the sight of the man she'd been trying to forget. "I've made up my mind," she said, though with less conviction than she intended. "My father's land is gone, my reputation in tatters thanks to Vincent's lies. What possible reason could I have to stay?" "Me," Yorke said simply, moving his horse closer. "I'm asking you to stay for me or let me come with you. Either way, I'm not losing you tonight." The cool night air swirled around them, and Eliza felt her resolve weakening. At 22, she had already weathered more storms than most, losing her mother at 16, watching her father drink himself to ruin, and now facing the humiliation of a broken engagement to Vincent Darcy, the banker's son who had courted her only to gain access to what remained of her father's once prosperous ranch. "You don't understand what I'm running from," she whispered. "Then tell me," Yorke urged, dismounting and approaching her horse. "Because I've ridden 15 miles in the dark to find you, and I'll ride 100 more if that's what it takes." Eliza hesitated, then slowly slid from her saddle. The ground beneath her boots felt solid in a world that had been shifting like quicksand. At 24, Yorke Newland had a reputation as a skilled ranch hand with a quiet demeanor and steady hands. He'd worked for neighboring properties since arriving in Wildwater Creek 2 years ago, and while they'd shared polite conversations and dances at social gatherings, she had never allowed herself to consider him as anything more than an acquaintance, not while she was promised to Vincent. "Vincent was never going to marry me," she admitted, the words bitter on her tongue. "I overheard him telling his father that once they foreclosed on my father's remaining acres, he would break the engagement. Said he'd fulfilled his end of their arrangement by keeping me distracted while they manipulated the loan terms." Yorke's expression hardened. "I never trusted that man, the way he looked at you like you were property to be acquired. And now I have nothing. My father passed with debts I cannot pay, and by this time tomorrow, everyone in town will know I was played for a fool." Eliza turned away, unwilling to let him see the fresh tears forming. "I cannot bear their pity or their whispers." Yorke stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. "Then we leave together. I've saved enough from my wages to get us started somewhere new. I've been planning to head north myself, maybe to the Montana Territory's northern reaches, where they say land is still available for homesteading." Eliza turned back to him, confusion etched across her features. "Why would you do that? Why follow me at all?" In the moonlight, Yorke's expression softened. Because I've watched you for 2 years, Eliza. I've seen how you care for your father despite his failings, how you work from sunrise to sunset without complaint, how you still find kindness for others, even when life has shown you little of it. He took a deep breath. And because every time you smiled at that worthless Darcy boy, I wished it had been me instead. The confession hung between them, unexpected and raw. Eliza studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or pity, finding only earnest hope. "I hardly know you," she said softly. "That's not entirely true," Yorke countered. "You know I'm a hard worker. You know I keep my word. And you know I rode through the night to find you when I realized you were gone." He extended his hand, not quite touching her. "Give me the chance to show you the rest." A distant rumble of thunder interrupted the moment, and both glanced at the gathering clouds on the horizon. "A storm's coming," Yorke observed. "We should find shelter for the night, make our decisions in the morning with clear heads." Eliza nodded, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. The emotional turmoil of the past days, coupled with her hurried departure, had drained her completely. "There's an abandoned trapper's cabin about 2 miles east of here. My father used to trade with him years ago before he moved on." "Lead the way," Yorke said, returning to his horse. "And Eliza." He waited until she met his gaze. "Whatever you decide tomorrow, I'm glad I caught up to you tonight." The cabin was small but sturdy, weathered by years of Montana's harsh seasons but still offering protection from the elements. Yorke quickly set about starting a fire in the stone hearth, while Eliza unpacked the meager provisions she'd brought for her journey. As the fire's warmth began to fill the single room, Eliza found herself studying Yorke's profile. She had always recognized his handsome features, the strong jawline, the thoughtful eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, but she'd never allowed herself to dwell on them. Now, watching him tend the flames with quiet efficiency, she wondered what life might have been like had she noticed him sooner. "You're staring," Yorke said without looking up, a small smile playing at his lips. Eliza flushed. "I was just thinking that I don't understand why you would upend your life for someone you barely know." Yorke sat back on his heels, the firelight dancing across his features. "Sometimes you know a person not by the time you've spent with them, but by the impact they've made on your heart." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The first time I saw you was at the Founders' Day celebration. You were helping old Mrs. Holloway find a place in the shade, giving up your own spot under the elm tree. It was a small thing, but it told me everything about who you are." Rain began to patter against the cabin's roof, softly at first, then with increasing intensity. "And who am I, according to Yorke Newland?" Eliza asked, a challenge in her voice. "You're someone who gives when you have little to offer. Someone who stands tall even when the world tries to break you down." His eyes met hers across the small space. "Someone worth following into the night." The simple honesty of his words touched something deep within Eliza. No one had ever seen her so clearly before, not Vincent with his hollow compliments, not even her father in his better days. "Tell me about your plans," she said, changing the subject before her emotions overwhelmed her. "You mentioned northern Montana." Yorke nodded, accepting her redirection. "I've been saving for land of my own. There's good grazing territory near the Milk River, according to letters from an Army friend stationed at Fort Benton. Fewer people, more opportunity." He arranged the kindling more carefully. "I'm tired of working other men's dreams." "I know that feeling," Eliza replied softly. "I've spent my whole life watching my father chase schemes that never materialized, then cleaning up afterward." The conversation flowed more easily after that. They shared simple truths about themselves, Yorke's childhood in Pennsylvania, before his family moved west after the war. Eliza's memories of her mother's garden that once bloomed behind their homestead. They spoke of books they'd read, places they hoped to see, small details that painted pictures of their separate lives. As the night deepened and the storm raged outside, Eliza felt something shifting within her. The desperate need to flee was gradually replaced by curiosity about what might happen if she chose a different path, not one of escape, but one of possibility. "You should get some rest," Yorke eventually said, nodding toward the narrow cot in the corner. "I'll keep watch by the fire." "You need sleep too," Eliza protested. "I'll manage," he assured her. Years of pre-dawn ranch work trains a man to function on little rest. Reluctantly, Eliza settled onto the cot, wrapping herself in the woolen blanket from her saddlebag. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she watched Yorke through half-closed eyes. He sat motionless by the fire, occasionally adding a log, his expression thoughtful in the golden light. She must have drifted off eventually, because she awoke to gray dawn light filtering through the cabin's single window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh, washed world. Yorke was no longer by the fire. Panic fluttered in her chest until she heard movement outside. Rising quickly, Eliza stepped out to find him tending to their horses, which were contentedly grazing on the wet grass nearby. "Good morning," he called, seeing her emerge. "There's coffee brewing inside. Not the finest, but it'll wake you up." "You didn't sleep," she observed, noting the shadows beneath his eyes. He shrugged. "Wanted to make sure you were safe." The simple statement carried more weight than elaborate declarations might have. Over bitter coffee and jerky from Eliza's provisions, they faced the decision that awaited them. "I still intend to leave Wildwater Creek," Eliza said firmly. "There's nothing there for me now." Yorke nodded, his expression neutral. "And my offer stands, together or apart, but I won't force my company on you." Eliza studied him across the small fire he'd built outside for cooking. "Why me, Yorke? Truly. There are plenty of women who would gladly accept your attention." "Because they're not you," he answered simply. "I can't explain it better than that. Some things just feel right, like the first time I broke a wild horse and knew I'd found my calling." He smiled slightly at the comparison. "I just know." His certainty was both frightening and exhilarating. Eliza had grown up watching her father chase elusive dreams with the same conviction, only to face disappointment after disappointment. Yet something about Yorke's quiet confidence felt different, rooted in reality rather than fantasy. "If I agree to this," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for someone to rescue me. I was prepared to make my own way." "I know that," Yorke replied. "I'm not offering rescue, Eliza. I'm offering partnership. There's a difference. Partnership." The word resonated with her in a way that Vincent's flowery promises of provision and protection never had. 2 days' ride north is a small settlement called Cooper's Creek, Yorke continued. "My friend Thomas has work for me there if I wanted good pay, helping establish a new ranch. We could start there, save more for our own place." He paused. "Or we part ways and you continue on your journey alone. The choice is yours." Eliza took a deep breath, weighing the options before her. The sensible choice would be to continue alone. She barely knew this man, despite the night of conversation that had revealed more of his character than months of distant observation ever had. Yet something told her that turning away from Yorke Newland would be the kind of mistake she'd regret for years to come. "Cooper's Creek," she said finally, "but I have conditions." A smile spread across Yorke's face, transforming his tired features. "Name them." "I work too. Whatever settlement we reach, I contribute equally." "Done." "And this is a practical arrangement," she continued, though her racing heart somewhat undermined her businesslike tone. "We help each other establish new lives but make no promises beyond that." Yorke's smile dimmed slightly, but he nodded. Agreed, though I hope you'll allow me to court you properly once we're settled. No pressure, just the chance to know each other better. It was a reasonable request, and Eliza found herself nodding. One more thing, she added. No lies between us. Ever. I've had enough deception to last a lifetime. That's the easiest promise I'll ever make, Yorke said, extending his hand across the fire. Partners? Eliza placed her hand in his, noting the strength and warmth of his grip. Partners. They set out within the hour, heading north along less traveled trails to avoid any chance of encountering people from Wildwater Creek. Yorke led the way, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing knowledge about the territory ahead. Eliza found herself appreciating his competence in the wilderness, how he checked their horses' shoes before departing, how he scanned the horizon periodically for signs of danger or weather changes. As they rode side by side through a flowering meadow, Eliza's thoughts returned to the previous night's revelations. You said you've watched me for 2 years, she ventured. Why did you never speak up before? Yorke adjusted his hat against the morning sun. You were engaged to Vincent Darcy. I respect boundaries, even when I disagree with a lady's choice. There was no bitterness in his tone, just stated fact. And if Vincent hadn't shown his true colors, would you have just let me marry him? No, Yorke admitted after a pause. I'd planned to speak to you before the wedding. Had a whole speech prepared about how you deserved better, even if better wasn't me. He glanced over with a self-deprecating smile. Probably would have made a fool of myself, but I couldn't have watched you tie yourself to a man who didn't treasure you properly. The honest admission touched Eliza deeply. In Wildwater Creek, propriety and appearances governed all interactions. Yorke's willingness to risk social censure to prevent her unhappiness spoke volumes about his character. Thank you, she said quietly, for being willing to speak an uncomfortable truth. They rode in companionable silence for several miles, the rhythm of their horses' hooves creating a soothing backdrop to Eliza's thoughts. By midday, they stopped near a stream to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of dried meat and hard biscuits. Tell me about Cooper's Creek, Eliza requested as they sat in the dappled shade of cottonwood trees. What kind of place is it? Growing, Yorke replied, leaning back against his saddle. About 40 families when I passed through last winter. A general store, blacksmith, small church. The railroad's planning a spur line there within 2 years, so folks are anticipating growth. He plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between his fingers. It's the kind of place where newcomers can establish themselves without too many questions about their past. And your friend Thomas, how do you know him? We worked the same cattle drive from Texas 3 years back. He was a good man in tough situations, fair, hardworking. When he wrote that he'd secured backing for his own spread, I was happy for him. Yorke's expression grew thoughtful. He offered me a position last year, but I wasn't ready to leave Wildwater Creek. His eyes met hers. Couldn't leave while you were still there. The simple confession made Eliza's heart flutter unexpectedly. She had spent so long believing that love was what she felt for Vincent, a comfortable affection built on shared community and mutual advantage. Now she wondered if she had ever understood love at all. What skills do you have, beyond horsemanship? She asked, diverting the conversation to practical matters. I'm decent with carpentry, can track game, break horses better than most, he smiled. But my real talent's with cattle. I understand their ways, can predict behavior that others miss. It's why Thomas wants me to help build his herd with the right stock. And I can cook, so keep accounts, Eliza said, mentally cataloging her abilities. My mother taught me herbal medicine before she passed, and I managed our household after she was gone. Valuable skills in a frontier town, Yorke observed. You won't have trouble finding work if you choose it." The if hung between them, acknowledgement of the independence he continued to offer despite his clear preference for keeping her close. This respect for her agency only increased Eliza's growing admiration. They resumed their journey through afternoon heat, crossing rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers. As dusk approached, Yorke led them to a sheltered hollow near a small creek, a campsite he remembered from previous travels. Setting up camp together established an unexpected intimacy. They worked in natural tandem, Yorke caring for the horses while Eliza arranged their bedrolls and prepared a small fire. The domestic rhythm felt both foreign and familiar, a glimpse of what partnership might truly mean. Under a vast canopy of stars, they shared stories of their lives before Wildwater Creek. Eliza spoke of happier times on her family's ranch, before drought and her father's poor decisions began their downward spiral. Yorke described his journey west after his parents' deaths, working various ranches from Kansas to Montana, learning different skills at each stop. "I've never stayed anywhere longer than Wildwater Creek," he admitted. 2 years in one place is something of a record for me. What made you stay?" Eliza asked, though she suspected the answer. Yorke's gaze met hers across the fire. "I think you know." The night air suddenly seemed charged with possibility. Eliza looked away first, unaccustomed to such direct expression of feeling. "We should rest," she said softly. "We have another long day tomorrow." Yorke nodded, respecting her unspoken boundaries. "Good night, Eliza." "Good night, Yorke." She lay awake long after his breathing had deepened into sleep, watching the stars and contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. 2 nights ago, she had been the jilted fiancée of Vincent Darcy, facing humiliation and financial ruin. Now she was traveling toward an unknown future with a man she barely knew, yet somehow trusted completely. The journey to Cooper's Creek took 4 days, longer than anticipated due to unexpected challenges. A swollen river forced them to find an alternative crossing, adding half a day to their route. Then Eliza's horse threw a shoe, requiring careful travel until they encountered a small trading post where Yorke paid a premium for repairs. These obstacles, rather than creating friction, seemed to strengthen their developing bond. Eliza observed Yorke's calm problem-solving and adaptability, while he expressed admiration for her resilience and practical suggestions. By the time Cooper's Creek appeared on the horizon, a scattering of buildings nestled in a verdant valley, they had developed an easy rhythm of communication and cooperation. "It's smaller than I expected," Eliza remarked as they approached the settlement in the golden light of late afternoon. "But growing," Yorke pointed out, indicating several structures in various stages of completion at the town's edges. "That's Thomas's place just beyond the creek, the 2-story house with the red barn." Anxiety suddenly gripped Eliza as reality set in. "What will you tell people about me, about us?" Yorke considered the question carefully. "The truth, I think, that you're a friend who needed a fresh start and I was heading this way myself." He glanced at her. "Unless you'd prefer something different," Eliza appreciated his deference to her wishes. "No, the truth is best. Though perhaps we needn't share all the details about Vincent and my father's debts." "Your past is yours to share or keep private," Yorke assured her. "No one here will pry too deeply." Thomas Callahan proved to be exactly as Yorke had described, straightforward, genial, and clearly delighted to see his old friend. A broad-shouldered man with a booming laugh, he welcomed them into his spacious home without hesitation. "Any friend of Yorke's is welcome here," he told Eliza after brief introductions. "And we're short on womenfolk in these parts, so you'll find yourself much in demand for social gatherings." His wife, Margaret, a practical woman with kind eyes, showed Eliza to a comfortable guest room while Thomas and Yorke discussed the ranch's needs. "You'll stay with us until you get settled," Margaret insisted. "The nearest boarding house is rudimentary at best, and a single woman needs proper protection." "That's very generous," Eliza replied, touched by the immediate acceptance. "But I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Margaret waved away her concerns. "We've space enough, and I've been desperate for female company. The nearest neighbor woman is 3 miles away." She studied Eliza with frank curiosity. "So, you and Yorke. He's never mentioned a lady friend before." Eliza chose her words carefully. "We're friends who are helping each other make a fresh start. Nothing more formal than that." Margaret's knowing smile suggested she doubted this arrangement would remain so uncomplicated, but she simply nodded. "Well, friend or more, he's a good man." One of the few Thomas speaks of with genuine respect. Over a hearty dinner that night, plans took shape. Yorke would begin work immediately, helping Thomas select breeding stock for his expanding herd. Eliza, to her surprise, received an offer as well. "Margaret's been trying to establish a proper kitchen garden and medicinal herb patch," Thomas explained. "But between helping me with ranch accounts and household duties, she's had little time. If you've knowledge of such things, we'd pay fair wages for your assistance." "I would enjoy that very much," Eliza replied, grateful for the opportunity to contribute immediately. Later, as they walked alone in the Callahan's garden under a crescent moon, Yorke seemed pensive. "You're quiet," Eliza observed. "Having second thoughts about bringing me along?" "Not at all," he answered quickly. "Just thinking how different this might have been if I'd spoken up sooner, if I hadn't waited until you were already leaving to tell you how I felt." "We can't know what might have been," Eliza said gently. "Perhaps I wouldn't have been ready to hear it while still believing in my future with Vincent." Yorke nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "Thomas mentioned there's a small cabin on the property, the previous foreman's place. He's offered it to me once we get it repaired." "It's nothing fancy, but it would be yours," Eliza finished for him, understanding the significance for a man who had never owned property. "That's wonderful, Yorke. It could be ours," he said carefully. "Eventually, if that's something you might consider." The suggestion hung between them, neither a demand nor a casual remark. Eliza felt her heart quicken at the possibility of a shared future, something she had not allowed herself to contemplate since fleeing Wildwater Creek. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would like to see this cabin first." Yorke's smile in the moonlight was worth the journey of 1,000 miles. "Tomorrow, then. I'll show you tomorrow." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to Eliza's life. Each morning, she worked alongside Margaret in the expanding gardens, applying knowledge passed down from her mother about which herbs flourished best together, and how to prepare the soil for different vegetables. The physical labor was satisfying, connecting her to memories of happier days on her family's ranch. Afternoons often found her helping with household accounts or assisting the town's midwife, who had eagerly welcomed Eliza's herbal knowledge. She began to build a place for herself in Cooper's Creek, gradually sharing more of her story with Margaret, who proved to be a compassionate confidante. Yorke, meanwhile, threw himself into work on the ranch, often returning late, covered in dust but visibly satisfied with his contributions. True to his word, he began repairs on the foreman's cabin during his spare hours, sometimes joined by Thomas and other ranch hands for larger tasks. They established a careful pattern of respectful courtship. Sunday afternoons were reserved for their time together, sometimes picnics by the creek. Other times simply walking the settlement's growing streets, discussing their observations and plans. Yorke never pushed for more than Eliza was ready to give, but his steadfast attention and genuine interest in her thoughts gradually wore down the protective walls she had built. One evening, nearly 2 months after their arrival, Yorke invited Eliza to see the now completed cabin. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a neglected structure was now a snug, well-crafted home. Yorke had added a covered porch, replaced broken windows, and thoroughly repaired the roof and walls. "It's beautiful," Eliza said, genuinely impressed as she explored the 2 small rooms. "You've done amazing work." "There's still more I want to do," Yorke replied, watching her reaction carefully, "but it's livable now. Thomas says I can move in next week." The moment felt significant, a turning point in their evolving relationship. In the 2 months since fleeing Wildwater Creek, Eliza had discovered more about Yorke Newland than she had learned about Vincent Darcy in 2 years of courtship. She had seen Yorke's integrity in daily interactions, his kindness toward others, his respect for her independence even as his feelings deepened. Most importantly, she had discovered her own heart's capacity for genuine love, not the practical arrangement she had settled for with Vincent, but something both fiercer and more tender. "Yorke," she said softly, turning to face him in the cabin that represented his dreams, "I think I'm ready for you to court me properly now." His expression transformed with joy, though he maintained the restraint that she had come to appreciate. "Are you certain? There's no rush, Eliza." "I've never been more certain of anything," she replied with newfound confidence. "These past months have shown me what a true partnership could be, what love built on respect and honesty looks like." Yorke stepped closer, gently taking her hands in his. "Since that night I chased after you, I've hoped for this moment. I knew then that whatever future awaited me, I wanted you beside me for it." "I'm glad you found me that night," Eliza whispered. "Glad you asked me not to leave without you." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place she hadn't known she was seeking. There was tenderness in his touch, but also a promise of passion carefully restrained, the same consideration he had shown in all their interactions. They married 3 months later in Cooper's Creek small church, with the Callahans standing as witnesses. Eliza wore a simple blue dress that Margaret had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of an elaborate veil. Yorke, usually seen in practical work clothes, cut a striking figure in a new suit ordered specially from Helena. The settlement turned out in full force for the celebration afterward, the community having embraced both newcomers as their own. As dusk fell and lanterns were lit in the Callahans' garden, Yorke led Eliza away from the festivities for a moment of privacy. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist as they stood beneath the same crescent moon that had witnessed their first private conversation in Cooper's Creek. "Completely," she assured him, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "Though I still sometimes wonder at how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't tried to run away that night." "I would have found you eventually," Yorke said with quiet certainty. "Some things are meant to be." Eliza Newland. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through her. "Is that so, Mr. Newland? And how can you be so sure?" "Because from the moment I saw you helping old Mrs. Holloway at that Founder's Day celebration, I knew you were the one I'd been looking for all my life." His expression grew serious. "I promise you this, Eliza, every day I'll try to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me. And I promise that you'll never have to chase me through the night again," she replied with a smile. "Unless, of course, you want to." His answering laugh was cut short by her kiss, and in that moment, under the vast Montana sky, Eliza knew that sometimes running away could lead you exactly where you were meant to be. 5 years later, the Newland Ranch had grown from the humble foreman's cabin to a thriving homestead. With Thomas Callahan's backing and Yorke's expertise, they had established a respected breeding operation for quality horses, while Eliza's expanded herb garden supplied medicinal preparations to settlements throughout the region. Their daughter, Margaret Rose, named for the woman who had become like a mother to Eliza, toddled happily around the flower-filled yard, her brother James Thomas crawling determinedly after her. The family they had created together was Eliza's greatest joy, a testament to what could grow from courage and second chances. On the anniversary of that fateful night when Eliza had tried to flee and Yorke had followed, they always shared a private ritual. Under the stars, they would ride to a special spot overlooking their land, remembering how close they had come to missing their shared destiny. "Don't leave without me," Yorke would whisper, echoing those words that had changed everything. And Eliza, her heart full of the love that had only deepened with each passing year, would always answer the same way, "Never again. Where you go, I go always."